Hello there, my friends. How's it going today? Well, it's about 3 o'clock p.m. on December 10th, I believe, 2019, just for a reference point. As I sat down to make this video, I thought there's several topics I wanted to talk about, but I really wanted to focus specifically on the one I intended on discussing here. Generally, we all have a lot of complaints about the world, and if we don't, we're probably not paying enough attention, or we're pretty privileged. But those complaints don't have to be constant. Even though some of the topics of my recent videos have been a little more along the lines of the problems of the world, it really gives me pause before I talk about something as controversial as, say, education in the U.S., only because it evokes so many different mindsets and different opinions on the issue. I guess what I'm saying is that the reason I don't talk more about negative or worldwide or controversial issues as often as I could, or I should say as often as I want to, is merely because I feel like if you don't have solutions, don't pose the problems. But more than that, I really like to focus on the positives in life, the things we can get accomplished. When it comes to education, I feel like this issue is so important that to not talk about it would be just the ultimate sin, if you would. If there's such a thing as sin, it would be the crime of the century to let a whole generation of kids grow up without understanding the world that they're growing up in. And that's what's happening now. It's so far beyond just the basic education system or the public education system. The fact is, we're moving into a future where we don't even understand what we're going to need, what skills we're going to require in the future. Now, I know most of you probably don't use long division in your daily life. If you have been through high school and you've done your long division and all that complicated bullshit algebra, you'll find that very few of you will actually use it. But if you think about how much energy is put into mathematics, the reason for that is because it's such a useful tool. It's something you can use that's versatile. Now, I'm good at basic, quick math, but not the deeper complexities. I'm amazed and enamored by the people who can sit there and write out equations and understand what that language means. Because as a musician, I understand hearing and playing the language of music in the same way that mathematics play in the mind of a mathematician. I respect that. But I'm also a wordsmith. And by that I mean that I'm very fortunate and grateful that I happen to have the mindset to be able to go through the education system and pick up enough to be in a spelling bee when I was in grade school. I didn't win or anything. I don't even remember if I don't remember actually doing it. I think maybe I entered a pre-test for a spelling bee. But the point was, it gave me a little bit of faith in myself. A few of my teachers when I was younger said, "Hey, you're smart. You could do great things. You should, put your time into learning these things." And I did. But I got failing grades all through high school and junior high. I was horrible. I was a skater kid with a mullet and didn't give a shit really about school. But I went. And so in the back of my mind, I was dedicated to being there. I just didn't do the homework. And the school system was not set up for the kind of learning I did. I got maybe a 1.5 grade point average all through my first year of high school. Then, halfway through my second year, I got kicked out. And I was sent to an alternative school in Northeast Portland, which was two city buses away. About an hour to an hour and a half travel time, both ways. I went. My brother got kicked out of his school and was sent to the same one. We went to different schools at the time, and we were both sent to the same alternative school, which consisted of less than 100 kids, maybe 50 kids, in just a few different classrooms with basic studies. Half of these kids dressed like gangsters, and most of them weren't. But the point being that when you're one-on-one with a group of people, I was there with Mexicans, blacks, gangsters, wannabes, yuppies, trendy people, everybody, and the hippies, my brother and I, the long-haired, tie-dye wearing, the only two guys, I think, besides one other dude that were like that. And all of us, there were never fights, never an argument, never a single bullshit debate or spitting or cussing at each other, anything. In a group of only 50 people, We were allowed to go out and smoke on our breaks outside. They didn't really care if you're a minor, didn't give you shit. Things were a little lighter, and that allowed us to flourish. We felt like we were respected, not just as kids, hey, you can't smoke out here, or you guys have to do this. There was no homework in the school, and all I had to do was show up and do the work that was required of me. And guess what? I got like a 3.6 or a 3.7 GPA without even making an effort. And a lot of other kids did too. And that was because you didn't take anything home with you. And, that's how I've always felt about school and work. So, I've spent too much time on my story about myself. I wanted to kind of give my perspective on it because all during this time, I've really enjoyed English and spelling. And I spent more time out of high school as I got older. Immersed in language and understanding of trying to understand the English language. I always forget to silence my phone. And it hardly ever rings. I get a text only when I'm making a video. So anyhow, earlier I was watching a documentary with Dan Rather, and where are the Dan Rathers of this world? The media, nobody believes in anything anymore. We've got things like alternative facts, and nobody believes in science, and there's considered this war on science, right? Which doesn't really exist. It's a subject for a video I'm going to do in a little while, but it's really a war on established facts. And it seems like when it comes to schools, a lot of folks want to blame the system, okay? And I just want to say, first off, I've been down that road of blaming the system for all the problems. But it doesn't address the issue or solve anything. So, sure, blame this system for the school's problems. But the show I watched with Dan Rather, I kind of got off track with the media thing, but I was saying the same thing happened with the media. The people demanded more extreme stories, right? Well, people also demanded to pay less for the schools. School funding isn't necessarily the problem, but how it's handled. And I watched a show with the Dan Rather one was about the Detroit school system and how they had out of $1.6 billion, they found in an investigation they had diverted $46 million of that to personal funds, to families, what they call the family finder's fee, or there's some term for it there where, the school board members as well as the faculty, higher ups and the administrators hire their own people, subcontractors, people that they know, pay them a little extra. And all of this comes at the cost of the kids and their education. And the reason it was so fascinating, and it was long, it was almost 2 hours, was the kids at Detroit were, and honestly, I'd planned to make a video about school this morning, and I watched that as kind of I wanted to add to my, thought process about what's really happening. Not only was a lot of that money diverted, but there are plenty of people out here who point the finger and give the old, well, that's what happens in poor black communities. And let me say, if that's how you feel, so be it. But there are a lot of poor black communities in Africa which have phenomenal schooling and a lot that are shitty as well. Well, there are a lot of poor black communities that basically don't have the same funding as the richer suburbs nearby. And I won't get into the politics of busing and how this affected, civil rights and segregation within schools and how hard people have fought against this. But it always comes down to some racial issue. It's an excuse for people to say, well, if you want to learn, you should just go to school and learn. And I would say that there was an interview done, I can't remember who did it. It was like Media Watch something. He was interviewing a guy who had just retired from the New Jersey public school system, and he was talking about how bad it is. Kids fucking in the stairwells, and actually groups of kids walking into classrooms and beating the shit out of other students, and the teachers can't do anything. So when they go to administration, this is where it gets interesting. Administration just turns a blind eye and says, forget about it. The reason being, they won't boot the kids, because if you do, it cuts into your funding, because your funding is based on your test scores, how many kids stay in your school, and this has to all stop. I mean, there has to be a way around this. People throw charter schools around like they're the solution. Let me put it this way. Privately run schools, no matter what they are a huge problem. But public run schools also run into the same issues. And a lot of folks would say, well, just, private schools are the best, People can't afford schooling because schooling is a complete ripoff. Even the textbook companies that sell to the public schools, we allow them to sell us information that is public information. And for some reason, by putting it in a certain format, they can charge hundreds of dollars per book. And I'm just talking about grade school and high school at this point. It's so much worse than college. Colleges are a complete scam for the most part. They are tax exempt. They are allowed to spend as much money as they want on whatever they want, and they don't have any liability. And not only that, but they're subsidized by your tax dollars. A lot of the money that goes to colleges, even private, are paid by the government, which comes out of your pocket, your coffers, right? And Harvard, for example, and this was, they have a $36 billion endowment. So they have a stash of $36 billion that they, for whatever fucking reason, on top of all their properties. But you think about this for a minute. Apparently, somebody did the math, and I haven't confirmed this math, but they said with the $36 billion endowment they have, they could pay all the tuition for all of their students for the next, not decade or 20 years or even 50 years. They could pay the tuition in full for all of their students for the next 120 years. So even if they gave back less than 10% of the money that they've greedily, earned through people who are still trying to pay off debt, even 10% would help pay for 10 years worth of tuition, or help people who are of lesser means to be able to afford an education. And because not everybody has the option to go to college. I sure as hell didn't. It wasn't something I could afford to do. If I could, maybe I would have wanted to, but I didn't. And the problem is, our education system is in the shit. It's completely crap. We fall into, last time I looked, I think America was like 30th on the list of education rankings. Think about this. We call ourselves this prideful nation, but really we're not that smart. And it's showing. It's really showing. It's unfortunate. I don't know what to do about it, but the fact that, these same colleges will go out and spend how many millions, how many hundreds of millions on new stadiums? Oh, they've got to have their sports. Got to have the football. I'm not trying to diss sports fans, because I know that you're probably hating on me for even saying that. I don't give a shit about sports when it comes to education. People need to understand their world. I could give a fuck about your football stadium, but that's what's important to them, and they will tell you it's about funding or it's about that. No, it's not. It's complete bullshit. In fact, a lot of these sports kids get away with hardly having any education at all, and they get to be passed without knowing a damn thing about the world, merely because they're good at sports. Everybody knows how that works, even in high school. My son, I was just talking with him about this. He's 25, and when he said, when he was in high school, all the kids and guys in football said the same thing. Oh, they could, they got around class, and they were able to not have to go to class or do this work because they were in football, and they could get passed anyway. And he told me his thought was at the time, why should I be doing any of this work? Because he did the work. And we just have our priorities ass backward. And that's my opinion, I can sit here and complain about it. What can I do? I've got to go pick up my own kids in a minute. But one of the most pathetic aspects of this to come out recently is the celebrities paying for their kids' education. I mean, it was so extreme. If you're not aware of the details, these famous actors and actresses, whoever the fuck they were, celebrities who were paying, hundreds of thousands of dollars to these colleges to fake their kids' education or to get them in there. They even photoshopped their kids' faces into sports games like pole vaulting and shit like that. It was pretty insane, the kind of stuff people are doing now. I mean, what kind of cheating shit is that to get a piece of paper? But whatever floats your boat. I could give a shit less about Harvard and Ivy League colleges. I just think people should have a basic ability to get an education at all. And people aren't. And there are people who are so just devastated because they go to class and they want to learn, but the rest of the class won't calm down. say in some of these, inner city fucked up schools, and the teachers can't do anything. They won't kick the kids out of class because then they'll lose their funding. And this is a major problem for people who really do want to learn, because it compounds and it causes other kids to say, why should I bother? Why should I even care? So they fudge the numbers to pass the kids. And it's a lot of more money. They found that administrators in a lot of these school districts actually get bonuses for the better numbers they get. And to me, that goes against everything education should be. It should never have been a profit-motivated venture. And I, for one, just like many of you, know that the public education system is fucked up. I know that there are problems, that there are flaws, and that they are missing a lot. I would say there are a lot of different viewpoints on that. From one side, they say we need to teach more science, and then a lot of people say, no, we need to put religion into schools. So we'll never agree on what we should be teaching our kids. But what I can say is that the way we teach our kids in Vancouver, Washington here is going to be way different from some little podunk town or some little place in Texas where they're fighting to put Adam and Eve into the textbooks. So be it. If you want to raise your kids that way, but there has to be some consensus, at least the freedom for local governments to use their money wisely and to hold those accountable that waste it. Because in Detroit, the investigation revealed that $47 million, a lot of it checks had been written into personal accounts of administrators, people that worked at the schools and people who didn't even work directly with the kids. And if you're not there working directly with the kids, then, you don't really understand the implications of what you're voting for and what you're doing. And to finalize this, they actually called a guy into the Detroit system. His name was Robert Bob. It was funny. Bob. He went in there and he investigated, found all these wrongdoings, and he tried to fix it, but the system just kept getting worse. And then the people started blaming him. And what it comes down to is this: finger pointing. And that's what we've always done in society, is blame each other for our bullshit. And so that's what I'm doing here. But I'm not blaming any individual. I'm blaming us, the fucking taxpayers, for voting against new funding for schools, because it happens a lot. I'm also blaming the teachers for not having the patience, some of them, because there are a lot of phenomenal teachers out there who put up with a lot of shit. I'm blaming the administrators, the principals, everybody, but I'm also blaming the parents. Because if you aren't raising your kids to respect people around them, if your kid gets passed all the way through school by being a complete fucking douchebag, and they go out in the real world, they're going to end up being accused of that millennial attitude, as a lot of people put it. And I don't buy into that, because I know a lot of younger kids who are very respectful, insightful, and aware. I'm not an ageist. I'm 44. I could care if you're 22 or 88, as long as you have a fucking head on your shoulders. But a lot of people don't. And a lot of the people that don't seem to be the ones that are running these panels and writing people off. Go look at some of these parent-teacher conferences or some of these school board meetings. They're insane. They get very heated. People screaming at one another, cussing at people. People are angry because their money's being mismanaged and they're just written off and their voice isn't heard. And let me just tell you this. When things get to a certain level and people get frustrated enough, things start to change, only through action. And usually that action is not pleasant. So I would hope our system can actually heal itself before individuals decide to go out and march in the streets like Hong Kong. I'd really like to do a video talking about that issue in Hong Kong, because what it is it's a boiling over point. Regardless of what you think about protesting, people got angry because of a systematic error, many systematic errors, and feeling oppressed. And when you don't have an education, you start to feel very oppressed. And I have a very strong empathy for people who can't even get a basic education when they want one. When there are people out there just floundering theirs away and being passed on accord of them making the school look good for the right numbers. And it's worse than you might think. I'll just put it that way. So, thanks for listening, and let me know what you think down below. Thanks to my subscribers, thanks to my commenters, thanks to my patrons, and have a wonderful day. I'll talk to y'all later.